Me, 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 me. I have to warm the voice up a little bit. Get ready for this video. Now, here we go. Start with Iamblichus. Iamblichus's concept of ritualized cosmogony in De Mysteris frames theurgy as a ritual reenactment of the divine creative process. By using material symbols, theurgists retrace divine signatures backward through the layers of being to unite the soul with the one, viewing ritual as a like with like cosmic maintenance. Theurgic rituals do not just contemplate the divine, they mimic the demiurgic, creative act of the gods, allowing the practitioner to participate in the ongoing creation of the cosmos. Unlike Plotinus, who favored intellectual contemplation, Iamblichus argued that because humans are embodied, material rituals are essential to lift the soul from the sensible world back to the intelligible realm. Rituals utilize specific sympathetic material objects and symbols, stones, and plants, that act as signatures of the divine, connecting the lower material world directly to higher divine realms, and these are the Santamata. The process allows the soul to escape fate and unite with its personal daimon, and ultimately with the divine, functioning as a cosmic operation. Iamblichus believed that the highest, most unified, and divine principles are supra-rational and cannot be reached through intellect alone, but only through the unification, henosis, of ritual action. And I would argue you don't necessarily need ritual magic to accomplish this. In fact, I think the most coherent and well fleshed out lineage of theurgy that is extant today is the Bardon lineage. Franz Bardon's theurgy, continued by masters like Mark Erasmus and Bob from 60 Skills of Meditation. But a lot of the principles are the same. In the case of the Bardon school of theurgy, it's not ritual magic. It's magic founded upon internal power practices, which is why I tend to be more of a adherent to that system. But the principles are generally the same. It is that ritualized cosmogony, essentially. The cosmogony referring to the process by which the universe was created, step by step. One of my favorite expressions of cosmogony comes from the Tao Te Ching of the Taoists, from Lao Tzu, and he says, from the Tao comes one, and from the one comes two, and from the two comes three, and from the three comes 10,000 things, all embracing yin and yang. And the one, of course, is Wu Ji, meaning without ridge pull, and the two is Tai Ji, which we know as yin and yang, and the three is Sambao, meaning the three treasures, which are referring to Jing, Qi, and Shen, and then the 10,000 things are everything we can see around us. Now, coming back to the heart of the matter here, the heart of the matter always being how do we really escape reincarnation here, understanding now that reincarnation isn't just a theory, it's really more of a fact, and the work of Michael Newton pretty much fleshes that out completely. The 10,000 things lies at the end of this cosmogony, at the end of the emanation from the one, astrotheurgy, to the 10,000 things. And outward you look and you see with your own two eyes 10,000 things all embracing yin and yang, and also all subject to the cycles of the heavens. The cycles of the heavens stir the happenings here on earth. But the interesting thing is, there really is still an individual element to it. You know, we have Mars and Venus. I always like to go back to the benefics and malefics. I like the positively and negatively charged planets because they really give you a sense of what makes samsara samsara. The benefics and malefics and being wildly twirled between them is what makes you a boat on turbulent waters with crashing waves. And it's not true that just because there are benefics and malefics, just because there is love and war and peace and conflict and aggression, there's Venus and Mars, it's not true that your vessel necessarily needs to be swept from side to side by crashing waves. You can be turbulent in the face of benefics and malefics. You can be swept about by wild passions, by love turning into hate, and then back to love. But there's an individual element to it. You see, the Venus and the Mars is indicative of things that are going to happen here on Earth. It is. It is indicative of external circumstances that can be quite reasonably predicted to happen to you, which is why something like horary astrology works. If you ask a question, I can answer that question. I can answer if something is going to happen and even roughly when in certain situations. That's because external circumstances are predictable. What remains free from fate, so to speak, is the individual element of how one is to react to these storms. And so one need not be swept up in wild passions. One need not be torn emotionally between anger, rage, and wrath, and aggression and screaming, and then back to softness, and then personal love and attachment. One does not need to be oscillating between these two poles, even though the poles are in the heavens. The negative and the positive are the benefics and the malefics, and they are in the heavens. But you can, as an individual, have stillness within that storm. And I think that's important because really the 10,000 things, they come most of all, I believe, from being swept up in dualities, in positive and negative charges, which is also to say that it's to be swept up in the benefics and the malefics, in the good and the bad. That's really our most immediate encounter with duality. We always talk about, oh, duality is so bad. We have to go back to non-dual everything. But it's like, where is the duality coming from? And most of all, it's coming from those positively and negatively charged planets. The planets work towards an experience of duality. They really do. You know, Saturn is not really doing a good job of making you see positive things, and Jupiter is not really doing a good job of making you see the dark side, negative side of life. It's just really not what's within their character. But you start to realize there's a little bit more to it than that. And then you start to realize that we have greatly overcomplicated the matters of spirituality. And it kind of all comes down to, in effect, addiction. Because as it turns out, the things that have addictive properties are basically universally outside. They're always external to us. There's a cop next to me, right next to me. Hope he doesn't pull me over because I got tinted windows. I got an illegally tinted window, a little too tinted. But yeah, the things that have addictive properties are in externality. They're in the 10,000 things. And so one of the things you realize is that what's propagating duality, what's propagating separation and fragmentation, not to forget that separation and fragmentation begins first and foremost with duality. We understand that God is not the sky beard cloud man. That's very basic. Very basic. And if you're at this channel now, you probably understand that by now. Although sometimes I am surprised. Sometimes I hear people ask, what? Well, if God isn't the bearded sky cloud man, then who is it? And I'm like, oh boy, we got some work to do. But we understand that God is the one, the monad, and no shortage of mystery schools and religions all throughout history have already identified this. Oh, dude, God's pulling somebody over. Holy shit, he's like a shark in the water. Yikes. So, yeah, you know, the Taoists pretty much understood this in the form of understanding Wuji and the Tao. The Gnostics understood this in the form of the monad. The Neoplatonists understood this in the form of the one, you know, and on it goes. It was really only with the bastardizations of the Abrahamic religions that we started to say, like, oh no, God is a guy in the clouds, and he's very jealous and very angry, and he's not the one that this other religion is talking about, and we need to go kill all the people of this other religion because they're blaspheming. You know, it's all just silliness. So we understand that it is the one. And yet, what is it that exactly is separating us from the one? Is it really just the fact that we're reincarnated into this world? That's a really important question, I think. Because if we understand that the Neoplatonists did, that the one is the good, then it would seem imperative that we get back to the good as soon as possible. But then it raises questions of why were we separated from the good and the one to begin with? And it comes again back to cosmogony. Because cosmogony always begins with the one, and then it emerges out into some form of duality. In Kabbalah, that's of course Ketcher into Binah and Chokhmah. It's the one into the two. And then from there, a series of various fragmentations occur. So what's causing this exactly? And I argue, in a sense, it really is addiction. It really is at the heart of the matter. The things that have addictive properties are things that offer fleeting and ephemeral orgasm up front, and then leave you susceptible to a kind of hangover after. That is a universal blueprint and pattern of all addiction. And as it turns out, that tends to be a common theme of just about everything that you find in outwardness. So some of the Hermeticism starts to become relevant again here. We have the as within, so without. As above, so below. And this is sort of the stratified identity of God. Again, I don't know what the fuck this guy's doing. The cosmogony is the creation of the universe, and the universe comes from a core, a source, and it expands ever outward. And so too is it important to understand that the universe is consciousness. The all is mind. The universe is mental. That's back to the principles of hermeneutics, the Kabbalion. And so similarly, we see that we have a core of our being, and it's the innermost stratum of our being, meaning it's found in inwardness. And then as consciousness goes outward, it moves towards the 10,000 things rather than the one. The one is the innermost core, right? Just like Pluto deals with things that are at the innermost core. It penetrates to the innermost core, which is why Pluto has a lot to do with bringing you back to the one, because the focus is towards the innermost core. And this is why the outermost stratum is the earth. The earth then signifies the 10,000 things. You can kind of see this in the planetary kabbalistic correspondences. A lot of sort of like modern correspondences correlate Keter with like Neptune and Pluto. And Malkut, the lowest, really has a lot to do with the 10,000 things, has to do with the earth. And yeah, this is the as above, so below, and the as within, so without. Because the further in we go, the closer we get to the one. The further out we go, the closer we get to the 10,000 things. But the inner experience is not the addictive one. It's the outer experience. The outer experience is akin to drugs. And so to speak of the outer experience is to speak of the world and the flesh. And those are the things that are addictive. I think narcissism is a great case study for one of the greatest addictions, which is identification, self-identification. Narcissists are a beautiful case study here because they have no connection whatsoever to their inner self. They have been consumed entirely by a false identity and sort of a patchwork creation of ego images. So there is no connection to the self, and certainly if there's no connection to the inner self, then even more tenuous would be the connection to the innermost core, which is the consciousness that is pure awareness, which is the one. And it's like, well, what is causing this? Well, really, it's a form of addiction. It's cheap dopamine thrills from having an idealized image be validated, and it is the avoidance of pain in the form of avoiding being identified with, in psychological terms, sadistic superego accusations that are incongruent and oppositional to the ego ideal, right? So there's addiction there. They want to get high on drugs. They want to get high on having a fake identity be reinforced, and to feel like they have a particular role or place in the world that is desirable. And then when they feel the hangover, when they feel the fear of that being lost, they try to get another hit of their drug. Narcissistic supply literally works exactly like drugs. If you know, you know. Yeah, narcissism is kind of like been compared to alcoholism. But this is not the only addiction. And by the way, there's a little bit of narcissism, so to speak, in everybody. Everybody is susceptible to identification and to ego. And it operates on a very similar mechanism of everything of which I just spoke. This is who I am, and who I am has value relative to my surroundings, and that makes me feel good. That gets me high on feeling good, and if I don't have it, I feel like I have a hangover. Okay. It's also lust for the things of the flesh. When I have sex, I feel great, and then I feel not so great, so I need more sex, you know? Or it's even addiction to needing to get even. You know, the key word in all these things is need. I need something outside of myself. It's really at the heart of the matter here. And this can be found in really all the deadly sins, which is why Christianity, particularly ascetic, monastic-leaning denominations and schools of Christianity, like Orthodoxy, the deep Christianity that approaches things like a monk, is actually, I find, ironically, a little more effective than theurgy at aligning with the divine. Which is funny to think about, because everything about Christianity's theology is just absolutely chopped and screwed and totally wrong and totally impotent, unhelpful, invalid, incorrect. The gods essentially that they worship basically don't exist. There's no actual God named Jesus that can bestow any miracles upon request. You have substantially higher success rates just doing basic ritual magic, etc. You know, I went to an Orthodox church today, and I saw a bunch of people around me that essentially they haven't really progressed at all. Even the priest was like this overweight guy who was talking about, you know, I still live in pride, I still live in gluttony. It's like, well, no offense, I can see that you still live in gluttony, but I just can't help but ask the question, why? It's because your approach is impotent, and the entire premise of going in here and over again is, oops, I fucked up again, wash me clean again, wash me clean again. That is what had me get up and leave the church proceeding a little early today. I was a church proceeding, like it was a liturgy. Is because there's no transformation there. They're just going in and just washing it off and washing it off and washing it off again. So it made me realize Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, particularly Christianity as described through the Orthodox saints, the various saints throughout history, is an extremely potent philosophy on how to approach the world. And if you follow this philosophy and you actually transform yourself to be in alignment with this philosophy and this approach, you will be factually much more in alignment with the nature of the divine than theoretically, even if you did a lot of theurgy. You know, this is something that kind of came to me as I was researching the accounts of encounters with non-dual light from guys like Bob from 60 Schools of Meditation, Bardon School theurgists. Essentially, the reason that I like Bardon School theurgy so much is that the only people I have heard actually encounter the one, which is the monad, which is the real God, are these Bardon School theurgists. I haven't actually heard anybody else describe an encounter with this force. But he went on to say something that I thought was pretty to the heart of the matter, is when Bob encountered non-dual light, there seemed to be an entity guarding it, which I believe is associated with Pluto, as likely a Plutonic spirit of some kind, that said to him, you can't cross over into this yet. You still have too much attachment. Too many attachments, too much identification, all this stuff. And so essentially, the value of the theurgy is already very clear. It brings you directly to what you're trying to rejoin. Brings you directly to the one, and our goal is to rejoin the one because the one is the good. But it was clear that there were certain criteria that Bob was missing, and he was being informed of this by the entity that guards non-dual light, which I believe is Pluto, or a Plutonic spirit of some kind. And I believe those criteria are addressed by, funny enough, just simple, ascetic, monastic, Orthodox Christianity. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of like two pieces of the puzzle that if you don't have both of them together, you're not really all the way there. So the theurgists, they can get to non-dual light, but they don't belong there because they haven't actually transformed their heart or their being to be in alignment with the divine. So it would be a profane thing at the door of the divine. And then on the other end, we have ascetic, monastic, Orthodox Christianity, which teaches you perfectly how to transform yourself to meet the criteria of what the divine is so that you can be accepted by the divine. But its spiritual tools are absolutely non-existent. I believe Orthodox Christianity and all forms of Christianity have absolutely zero connection to the divine whatsoever. They have no spiritual tools, and it's completely impotent and has no effect whatsoever, and their gods aren't real either. But the interesting thing is, if you apply this Orthodox Christianity approach to transform yourself, to listen to the words of the saints and to align yourself with this philosophy, to practice love and forgiveness, to practice humility, softens the ego, helps him to disidentify, to turn away from worldliness and fleshiness. The whole time you're doing this, you don't really have any connection to God at all, because basically you are still in bearded cloud skyman mode. But you have transformed your heart and your mind to the point that when you do encounter the divine, you will be easily and well received by it, which is why I think these two things in combination are very powerful. And so Orthodox Christianity is talking all the time about turning away from the world and the flesh towards more eternal things. It says, why do we love these transient things? We should love the eternal that is in all things, which is God. And that's absolutely true. The eternal element of everything is that which is at the core of everything, which is the One. And so it really comes back to addiction. And it becomes increasingly clear every time I step into an Orthodox church. They're talking about overcoming sin. Various sins, various forms of profanity, profane living, vulgar living, being a pig in some way. And yet, I can't help but realize everything of which they speak that they consider negative and disagreeable to the divine nature is a transient thing that follows this basic blueprint of addictiveness and addiction. These are our deadly sins. He spoke of pride, and pride is founded upon external validation, and yet it's never quite enough, is it? You need another hit, you need more drugs, which means the experience of pride is transient and addictive. There's highs and there's lows, and there's hangovers. And then sex and lust, I think, is most to the point. It's pure orgasm. It's a couple minutes of feeling on top of the world, and now literally like your life force is drained, and you have introduced filth into your being. You've introduced animal nature into your being. You've taken a couple steps away from divinity, and I think more to the point, you have sunk your energy into lower energy centers. So and this is the tendency, by the way, is the tendency is for the higher energy centers of the body to starve, like the crown, the third eye, the throat, the heart. These energy centers tend to starve because the lower energy centers, like the root and the sacral, basically monopolize all the energy, because that's where the attention is going, and that's where the lifestyle is being lived. And so we have these gigantic batteries of energy, right? Most of all, it's in the lowest energy center, in the sexual energy centers. And we can see this in the sexual cultivation practices of the Taoists. They basically rise energy up from the perineum, the genitals, to a newly formed lower dantian. You have to rebuild the dantian, lower dantian, and then you rebuild the middle dantian and upper dantian. Now these severely starved energy centers are being restored, and you are rebuilding a connection to the divine. So we see the two parts there. The lust is drawing us into outwardness. away from the one, which is an inwardness, and it's damaging our energy centers, which is the bridge to the divine. It's bringing us down into these lower energy centers. All of these deadly sins are forms of worldliness, which are forms of externality, which shatter the bridge to the divine in some way. It either shatters our energy centers, upper energy centers, which don't allow us to rise energy up, and it also draws our attention away from inwardness, and inwardness is where the divine is found. So we see this repeated pattern of being drawn into what's down and out. The world wants you down and out. It wants your energy centers way down, solar plexus, defensive, wrathful, egoic, sexual, territorial, feeling unsafe in your domain and needing to impose more control over your domain, having more access to hedonic pleasures, and so the heart starves, and then everything above the heart starves. And so certainly there's no connection to the crown. And so it comes back a lot to addiction. And so I think it's pretty telling that the addiction to outwardness is kind of the same as the addiction that Christianity seems to be most adept at addressing. You know, when somebody is an alcoholic, they go to a 12-step program where they're told to give themselves over to a higher power and to basically become a Christian. So Christianity has a good track record at dealing with addicts. Christianity seems to, more than other religions, address the problem of addiction. And addiction seems to be really at the heart of the matter here, because addiction is the cause of the cosmogony. The universe emerges from non-dual light, which is the core of the universe, and as cosmogony, it expands outward into darkness. It's consciousness moving from inwardness to outwardness. And so how can we be surprised that we're experiencing darkness when we're living in outwardness, when we are reenacting the cosmogony in the direction of the creation of the world? How can we be surprised that we're living in darkness and the world when the consciousness isn't moving inward to the non-dual light that's at the core, but is moving outward into what must be darkness, because everything outward from that non-dual light is increasing degrees of darkness? And with your own two eyes, you can see that the attention is not inward. You're looking out at the world right now, and you are visibly seeing 10,000 things. That is the cosmogony. It's consciousness oriented outward. And why do we put so much attention on what's outward? It's because what's outward and what's external is the world, which is addictive. And so ascetic monastic Christianity, as taught by the saints, it's really to the heart of matter. And the spirit of the thing that the saints say is very much in alignment with our best primary source for an evidential review of what the afterlife is actually like, and by extension what the divine is actually like, which is Michael Newton's work. Michael Newton is an objective, non-spiritual, irreligious psychologist who accidentally discovered what the afterlife is and what the divine is. So we know what the nature of the divine is, thanks to Michael Newton. And incidentally, this atheistic, non-Christian psychologist describes characters and scenes that are most reminiscent to the descriptions of the saints of Christianity. There's talk of the importance of discipline and righting your wrongs in life. It's a very big factor in the engine of reincarnation. And personal accountability. And actually, yes, love and forgiveness. And this is something you'll hear at every sermon, every time you go to the church, is they talk about one of the most important sins to overcome is judging others and not forgiving others. Judge not, lest ye be judged. And this is identical to the nature of the divine as described by Michael Newton, and the afterlife as described by Michael Newton, the life between lives. The energy is extremely, he says, disciplined, accountable, loving, and indiscriminately forgiving, and not condemning whatsoever. Accountability and discipline, but only at the level of the individual. It's never you die and you go meet these entities and they condemn you as being a terrible person. It's a lot more like they illumine and they bring light to who you've been. And now that you are kind of connected to everything else, and this is something you hear all the time in your death experiences, now that you have this sense of connection to everything else, the veil has been lifted, and now you understand the context of who you've been really, and therefore a lot of the lies and delusions you've had start to wash away. And so now you have the encounter of God, and you understand how different you are from God. So, to give an extreme example, like Ghislaine Maxwell, like electrocuting and sexually traumatizing 6-year-old girls, you can't really do that without transforming who you are at the level of your heart and soul. And then when you go encounter God, God doesn't even need to say a thing. God just stands as what God is. And then Ghislaine Maxwell is like, okay, it's way too clear now who I am, and I can't look upon you. I can only feel shame within myself. I can only feel like an imposter for being here in the presence of something so perfect, when I am a worthless, reprehensible wretch who has done no good in life and has only been evil and terrible. So yeah, accountability and responsibility and discipline is the theme, but never like condemnation, always at the individual level, the realization of what you're accountable for, and then choosing to take on that burden in a next lifetime. So yeah, the Orthodox Christian really is at the heart of the matter there, but there's really two parts to it, isn't there? Because I did get up and leave that church for a reason. It was the ineffectuality of their ceremonies. Essentially, they were telling stories of how they continuously fail to transform themselves, and that they come in to these confessions, and then they're cleansed by the priest, and then they get to try again. And we sat there, did liturgy, we sang, and we sung for a couple hours, and nobody really got anywhere. And you shouldn't really expect to get very far when all you're doing is saying, I'm so lowly, I'm so wretched, and you up there, Sky Cloud Man, you're so great, you're so awesome. That doesn't really do a whole lot. Really, at the heart of the matter is some level of personal transformation. I think that really is at the heart of the matter, because Pluto is at the heart of every matter. Pluto is at the core of every matter, and Pluto deals with evolution. This is the Ouroboros. Pluto is the Ouroboros. It's what makes incarnation a never-ending infinite cycle. Some consciousness dwells for some time in perfection, in non-dual light. But then there is a pull back to incarnation so that the consciousness of non-dual light, that is God, the non-dual consciousness, can experience fragmentation and then come back to non-dual light again, unified again, perfected and purified and unified again, but now transformed. Non-dual light is always being transformed, even though it can only be described by what it's not. That's what the neti is. Not this, not that. And yet, this, not that, non-dual light, that is God, is never quite the same. It's always being transformed because evolution is always underway. So, facing yourself and facing yourself brutally, honestly, really is at the heart of the matter here. And I guess some things that made me want to make this video is two YouTubers. And the first one I wanted to talk about, his name is Ken Wheeler, and his YouTube channel is Theoria Apophasis. And I'm bringing him up right now for a reason. Again, it's judge not, lest ye be judged, and I think that's really important. Is you need to be focused on how you can be transformed and how you can be better and how you can help others overcome the world as well. Every time that you sit in judgment over somebody else, you're kind of reinforcing hierarchy. You're kind of being like, I'm doing things right. I'm the one who's got it right. You're all messed up. So implicitly, I'm better, and you're worse. But I don't mean to bring this guy up to judge and reinforce this hierarchy of I'm better, you're worse. I want it to be more like a case study of where we can improve. Because this is a very well-read individual who seems to possess a fairly higher level of intelligence. And he has elucidated very much some of the important distinctions as it comes to sort of traditional, accurate religious notions and notions of various mystery schools. He's spoken extensively on theurgy and some of the matters at the heart of theurgy, as distinguished from sort of the chopped and screwed misconstrued modern reimaginings of what these religions and mystery schools were. Kind of spoken a lot about Buddhism, how he got Buddhism all wrong. But in theory, I should really like this guy's videos. There's really just one problem. This guy is speaking about how to do spirituality correctly, how we've made all these mistakes in interpretation, and how this is how we get it back on track. So theoretically, this guy should be like a master. He's got it lasered into such precision, absolute understanding, absolute wisdom. He should be a spiritual master. There's just one problem. This guy, I've seen a lot of guys on YouTube. This guy is easily the most obvious narcissist I've ever seen. And I would say 90% of every one of his videos is completely hot air, puffed up, self-glorification. I believe the average person, and if you've watched my videos, you know what I think about the average person. I believe the average person is leaps and bounds more spiritually successful than this guy. I believe this guy is at the absolute lowest rung of spiritual progress, which is important because he's speaking of matters at some of the highest level of precision. Very true to the traditional sources. He's done the heavy lifting of understanding the fine details of what was really meant by the original traditional iterations of all these different religions like Buddhism. But it's literally all lip service. It's literally just an egomaniac who's deriving narcissistic supply from being smarter than everybody else and being the only one who gets it right and being the only one who can understand why nobody else understands. So in other words, this is a trap that people can fall into, is their spirituality. And this is something I see all the time, by the way, on Facebook. Some of the members who've joined my community are like this. There's a girl I'm thinking of. I can't stop thinking because she's exactly this. It's lip service, spirituality in the abstract. No self-transformation on any level. In fact, it's spirituality and spiritual ego to such an extreme degree that I genuinely believe that their foray into spirituality has actually made them worse and make them have less in common with the divine. Your heart needs to be transformed, and who you are as a person needs to be transformed. Spouting off all these spiritual ideas doesn't really do very much at all. So that's something that monasticism, and even just hanging out at like a monastic dwelling, can teach you is you need to be humble, and you really need to shut the fuck up. Like, somebody really needs to tell this Ken Wheeler Theoria Apophasis guy, you really just need to shut the fuck up and actually do some work. You really need to turn off the camera and stop performing to your audience to try to seem like an intellectual. And you really need to just shut the fuck up and practice the things that you're preaching. So humility is really important there. I guess I bring up Ken Wheeler too because he brought up a topic that another YouTuber that I've been watching a lot, that I kind of love. This guy's YouTube channel is Schizo Dumps. And he's talking about the soul trap, sort of the Gnostic mentality of the world, which I definitely heavily agree with. And both these guys have one thing in common. They greatly disagree with meditation as a practice. But seemingly for different reasons. This Schizo Dumps guy is really against the idea of disidentification of neti neti, the dissolving of the ego. Yeah, but the Ken Wheeler guy, he elucidates over and over again that meditation isn't at the heart of like Buddhism or even theurgy. Neti neti is, which is disidentification. To stop identifying with this or that. And that's important because that's what you'll learn doing Bardon, that non-dual light can only be defined by what it's not. It can only be defined by neti neti. It has no discernible qualities. It can only be defined the negative. So Ken Wheeler makes a big stink about that. He says, no, meditation is, he says all the time, is like, why do meditation? Go get a lobotomy. Which seems to be missing the point. You don't necessarily want to alter the physical vessel you were given. That isn't going to lead to very much transformation. But I think he seems to have failed to realize how much meditation can actually help with disidentification and neti neti. Because it turns your attention away from the external world so that you can start to focus on what is there when the external world is not there, which is just pure awareness, which is the consciousness of non-dual light. But the schizo dumps guy, are not to preside in judgment here, but it is a little funny. He talks a lot about how this world is evil, which it is, and how it's a soul trap, which it also is. But his mentality on how to get out of it seems to be a little misguided. He seems to think that you can carry, you're not supposed to get rid of your individual identity. You're supposed to keep your individual identity, and you're just trying to get out of this hell realm so you can go play somewhere else. So you can go to another realm that is more fun and more nice things. So essentially, he doesn't want to play in this playground anymore. He wants to go to a different playground where you can have more fun things rather than experiencing negative things. And so this kind of ties into the theme of drugs. The world is drugs. Externality is drugs. And that's why addiction is at the heart of these matters. And this is also why Neptune isn't too far from Pluto, from being at the heart of all matters. Neptune is the next planet after Pluto. Neptune rules addiction. So leaving behind the illusion at the heart of that is to overcome addictions. What was I talking about? Yeah, so you think you go play in a different playground. But yeah, the idea of drugs. So the topic of drugs, his mentality is that why do I have to be born into this hell realm where so all these terrible things happening, where it's clear that like everybody is possessed by demons, which they are, and the body has all these terrible limitations, almost like being born is like a humiliation ritual. Why can't I go play in this other playground where things are nice? I keep the ego, keep the identity, I keep all my predilections, I keep my external mentality, but I just want to go play in a nicer playground. And so some of his prescriptions, I've heard this from some of the soul trap people, is I'm going to meditate on how when I die, I'm just going to say non-servium, and I am going to say I I reject your insistence that I come back here, to not go into the light. And I think the best way I can put this is, how do you think you got here? I wonder how this guy thinks, I wonder how Schizodumps thinks he got here. And I would argue that it's similar to gateway drugs. Drugs are found in outwardness. And so you may have at one time existed in a place where things are nicer, but things have to be nicer because they're more spiritual. And things can only be more spiritual if they're connected to spirit, which means to be connected to the divine source, which again is only found in inwardness. So wherever things were nicer, it was a realm where it was well established that one should not live in outwardness, and you should live in inwardness instead, because that's where the good is. The one is the good. And we see this in the yugas as well. The ages that the earth goes through. In the Satya Yuga, Golden Age, things are not just more perfect and harmonious and pleasant and peaceful, they're also less worldly. There's more of a focus on a relationship with the divine and less of a focus on worldliness. And then with each subsequent yuga and age, things get worse and more horrible and more brutal and more painful, but always in increasing measure with worldliness. So the Kali Yuga, which we exist in now, is the most horrible, the most evil, the most demonically possessed, the most brutal, the most sadistic, but also it's the most worldly of the yugas. It's the most carnal. There's basically no connection to the divine as well, and where there is connection to the divine, it's a very misconstrued, reimagined idea of what the divine is. There's a lot of spirit, deity worship, demon worship, clipothic path working, and stuff like that. So back to this idea of why don't I just go to this other pleasant realm? Well, it's because you're not, first of all, you're not in alignment with that other realm. You can only be born into where you have alignment with that, with where your soul is at. So that's number one. But even if you were able to place yourself in that more pleasant realm, and you are somehow able to roll back all your vice and carnality and low vibrational ways that are in alignment with the earth rather than other realm, you would still be dwelling in a measure of outwardness, externality and worldliness. And if you're dwelling in externality and worldliness, you are dwelling in drugs. And if you are dwelling in drugs and addictive circumstances that present to you orgasm up front, direct pleasure in quick bursts up front, and the expected hangover, then it should not come as a surprise that that will get worse. It will always get worse. You can only become more carnal and more worldly. You can only become more of an addict unless there is a force pulling you out of the world. And this is what it means to be a chosen one. To be chosen out of the world means for Pluto to be dragging you out of the world against your will, which means that it's employing malefics to destroy your experience of what's pleasant and addictive. this is again where I call my channel the death of Venus, for example. Yeah, you'll see this in the natal charts of chosen ones. Their benefics are in some way being hindered by either essential debility or aspects to malefics. And you could see in my chart a perfect 3-minute, I believe, Venus-Mars opposition with Venus in the 6th house, bad house, and then Mars in the 12th house, and the Mars retrograde. And my Jupiter is squaring Saturn. So my benefics, my experience of the hedonic elements, the pleasurable elements of the world, are hindered and ruined by malefics. This is in accordance with the will of Pluto, which is trying to choose you out of the world. So that Pluto element's really important, and this is why at the heart of the matter, being an ascending soul or descending soul is really the most important part. Is because if there is not something pulling you out of the world, choosing you out of the world, there's basically no other possibility really than to become a bigger and bigger addict, which is to move into greater and greater outwardness, which is to move into more and more darkness. And eventually you accumulate so much darkness that really Earth is not enough for you anymore. And you need even more twisted hell realms, you know? And so that's really the great mystery, is when does Pluto choose you out of the world? And I think that with Pluto's correspondence with free will, of control, Pluto has to do with control. What control is at the individual level, and when control is at the individual level, it's called free will. There is a mystery there as to how the individual's will is recovered to be in alignment with Pluto's will, which allows future spirit guides, personal daimons, to work towards Pluto's aim of choosing you out of the world, which is to assign malefics to ruin your worldly experience so that the lifestyle of an addict to worldly things does not work for you anymore. But these guys' condemnation of meditation seems to be very misguided. First of all, it's always a good idea to pay attention to what demons get irritated at, because demons, again, are representations of the worldly will, the will of the world, which is to rape, violate, and fragment and break. And again, the world is the inverted divinity, so demons are expressions of the inverted divinity. And so if a demon becomes irritated at something, it's a good sign you're moving in the right direction. And one of the things that irritates demons the most is silence and stillness. And this is something that the schizodumps guy gets quite right. Is he says that the reason demons don't like silence and stillness and lack of distraction is because there's no loosh to be made there. Demons feed on trauma and hopelessness and shame and fear and hatred and anger. And the second that you choose to disengage with the world and all of its distractions, all of its 10,000 distractions, then there's really no pull to any of those emotions. And so what I have found, particularly a great case study for demons is narcissists, because they are the most directly demonically possessed. Somebody can't really be a narcissist without being demonically possessed. And one of the things I've noticed makes narcissists absolutely furiously angry and upset is an attitude of non-participation. So if you try to get revenge against a narcissist, that is actually a fuel source for them. That is what some call narcissistic supply, but you could also call it loosh. It's because you're wrapped up in them and you're feeding them negative emotion. And so that feeds the demon that is taken over the narcissist. But no contact makes narcissists furiously berserk and sends them into absolute panic mode and makes them lose their fucking shit, essentially. And yeah, that is a great example of how demons operate in general. And so what better way really to disengage with all of these distractions and to reconnect with divinity than meditation, I say. Really a great hindrance to this connection to the divine is just the fact that you have eyes and you can look out the world and see all of these things, which kind of end up being distractions a lot of time. There's a story of a saint. It was a woman saint. I can't remember her name. But she was said to go to a blind Christian girl. And this saint prayed that this blind Christian girl, little Christian girl, can be healed of her blindness. And then the next day, she was able to see. And then the little girl wept. But then she said to the saint, she said, please pray that I might be blinded again so that I may be closer to God again. Yeah, she said, make me blind again so I can be closer to God, blind again. Because if you can't see, there's really no distractions. And I'm not saying to do nothing but this. I'm not saying to do nothing but meditate. But meditation is extremely powerful. It loosens your connection to the world. It makes everything outside of yourself less serious. And that's something demons really need, is to be taken seriously. Because when you disengage with the world and you reconnect with the divine, it becomes evident that everything outside of yourself is not worth taking seriously at all. And therefore, demons are essentially a pitiful laughingstock. They are these loud, obnoxious jesters, desperate for attention, desperate to be taken seriously, but they're a bumbling ass. They're an obnoxious, loud, bumbling ass, trying their best to cause a ruckus and make all these distractions and make all this noise and be taken seriously. But there's really nothing about them to take seriously. They're essentially a joke and a mockery of existence, which is why they dwell on the earth and in the world, because the world is the inverted divinity, and it's a mockery of reality. Reality is the divine. The world is just an imitation. And this is where you get all this destiny swapping from. This is demonic behavior, because demons are of the nature of the world, and the world is an imitation, inverted divinity. When you get demonic people, all they can do is copy people like me, who are real, and try to replace them by copying their whole personality In the same way that the world tried to, and so the so-called demiurge tried to replace the divine and God with this false creation. It's really misguided because you can't really replace anybody because there is nobody. There is only the consciousness, and you can't replace the consciousness. You can only imprison the consciousness in delusion. And when somebody tries to so-called destiny swap, they are trying to replace a real person in the world, but the world is fake. And so essentially the real person, now being removed from the world because they've been replaced, now have less contact with the fakeness and more contact with the divine, which is the realness, the real experience. And then the person who replaced the other person, replaced the real person, this person is less in contact with the real self because they have imitated the other person, and they're more in contact with the world, is even more fake. And so destiny swapping is only really hurting the destiny swapper. And in a sense, it's actually bringing the destiny swapped closer to the divine. And what brings a person most close to the divine is just silence, monasticism, isolation, love, forgiveness, theurgy, astrotheurgy, disidentification, neti, all these things, which you can learn from the saints of orthodoxy and Bardon's theurgy. And yeah, another thing, the what is this guy's name? Schizo Dumps. He says, yeah, the love and forgiveness thing, that's another psyop. This is to allow evil people to trample over you. And if you're humble and if you're loving and forgiving, that basically just makes you a pussy pushover that people can like bully you and take your lunch money over and over again. I think he's saying that because he has a background of being bullied, which I have compassion for, also in an ultimate sense, because the world is the ultimate bully that wants to take everything valuable, which is your divine spark. But no, love and forgiveness is not only just for yourself, it's for everybody involved. One of the most potent acts of love and forgiveness is the kind of love and forgiveness that washes away sin, that one may be forgiven by the divine, which we find in the Christianity, which essentially means to dissolve karma on an evildoer before it's experienced. That's a hard one to wrap your head around. That's something that was very oppositional to my values for a really long time, because I really value justice. I really value people accounting for their misdeeds. But I think the real goal is just to wake everybody up from the sickness that is this world, because all evil stems from how the original pure non-dual consciousness, the consciousness of non-dual light, was perverted by the world. That's what created evil. So I think the real goal is, no matter who out here is disgusting and evil, we need to restore their consciousness to a purer state so that we can return to paradise or Eden or whatever you want to call it, which is really non-dual light, because the exile from paradise came from the consumption of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the tree of duality. And so in order to come back to so-called paradise is to overcome duality, overcome original sin, and to return to non-duality and non-dual light. And so, yeah, to again, the saints get it right. Yeah, think of the worst guy. I really hate when harm comes to children or animals. So there is a part of me that would like to see Ghislaine Maxwell and what's his name, Jeffrey Epstein, tortured in a form of hell that is much longer than a human lifetime. But no, actually, let's love and forgive them even. Disgusting, terrible people. Let's love and forgive them so that they can come back to paradise. So that everybody can come back to paradise. And this is possible through Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono has the power to heal terrible people. If I do Ho'oponopono, if I do love and forgiveness by a terrible person, they may not have accounted for their evil deeds, but they start to become more pure through my cleaning action. And so, yeah, love and forgiveness is also for the sinner, and that's really important, because if you as an individual can look upon the people that have transgressed against you the most, been the most terrible, evil people to you, and you can love and forgive them, that means your connection to the world is faint to non-existent. Because this is what people do is they want justice so much. They love wrath, they love karma, because they want to see justice in the world. But it's very misguided, because the world is not about justice. The world was always intended as an inverted divinity. It was always intended to experience the opposite of justice. That's why the idea of bringing heaven down to earth is extremely misguided. It can happen to a degree, but it doesn't happen because of us. I've talked about this in previous videos. It happens because of the movement of the heavens and the actions of the gods. It's the movements of the heavens that change the yugas. And so eventually we do come back to a Satya Yuga. Okay? And so, yeah, love and forgiveness in the face of an evil world that has transgressed against you. It's very counterintuitive, but it's actually one of the most profound acts of disengaging with the world, because wrath and the desire to see justice carried out in the world, it's not just a desire. It really quickly becomes more like a need. And we know by now that when we look outside of ourselves for something that we need, we are creating another anchor to the world. And so love and forgiveness is absolute freedom. And this is why they say God is love. The non-dual light, the consciousness of non-dual light is love, and it's what bestows absolute freedom. Universal love. Loving and forgiving all indiscriminately is absolute freedom, and this is the nature of the divine. Whereas the further we move away from that spirit of non-dual light out into perpetual outwardness, into darkness, into worldliness, it becomes more imprisoning. So I think that's kind of the irony of like the mythology and imagery of the fall of, the fallen angel is that it rebels. It doesn't like the logos dramaticos. It doesn't like the ordering rules of existence, and so it rebels against it. And ironically, in rebelling against this perfect harmony, it imprisons itself. It's fallen to where? To the world, which is the prison planet. So ironically, there is a specific set of rules. There is a specific way of engaging with everything you encounter as consciousness. And if you engage with everything you encounter this way, in humility, the kind of humility that Satan did not have when told to serve Adam and Eve. When you engage with humility, disidentification, love and forgiveness, even in your daily life, by practicing love and forgiveness, you feel a weight lifted. You become more free. Now, not to forget, it's weight that keeps us here in reincarnation. That keeps us here on this planet. It's literally weight, literally gravity. Where does the gravity come from? It comes from the sun. What is the sun? The sun is the ego and the false light. And so, letting go of this weight is how we overcome reincarnation. And the weight comes from one source and one source alone. And it is attachment. Attachment to things outside of yourself. More to the point, attachment to things that you find here on this lowest density in this earth. That couldn't possibly be anything but an anchor. The spirit wants to rise. But when you form attachment to these things in this carnal, physical, vulgar world, how can it rise? It's an anchor. It's an attachment. It's a hook. I need this. I'm hooked on this. And it's physical. Do the math, So, yeah, that's why to behave as the saints tell us to do, the Orthodox saints, Christian saints, and even other saints, Islamic saints, and to practice love and forgiveness, and to disidentify, to move in humility. Humility softens the ego, which assists in disidentification. You can't be part of non-dual light if you have an ego. It wouldn't be very non-dual. It would be non-dual light and Jerry. So, stuff is kind of obvious, you think about it. And most importantly, all of these things are facilitated and assisted by being in isolation to live the life of a monk, and also by meditation. So, do as the saints say, and practice love and forgiveness, and practice Bardon's theurgy. It's really the best and most complete lineage of theurgy. Best complete tradition that we know. We hear about these other schools of theurgy, like one of the last known theurgic rites from Iamblichus time is like the headless rite or the Mithras liturgy. The only thing is, the Mithras liturgy and the headless rite, those are tools. They are certain rituals that are part of a greater system that we have no idea about. Those are just a couple of practices that, without the greater context of where they're from, really are not that useful. So if you really ask the question, what systems of theurgy are available to us, as a complete system. We have the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which I don't believe is very effective at all. And then really all that's left I could think of is Bardon's theurgy, which you can learn from Bob from 60 Souls of Meditation. And yep, I think that's really all I have to say on the matter. We need to spiral inward and up. The heavens are inside of us, as above, so below, as within, so without. We've been living in outwardness, and we've been living in our lower energy centers. We need to practice chastity and temperance and discipline so that energy can rise from lower energy centers. We need to practice love, forgiveness, so that energy can enter the heart. Most people's hearts have been shattered, so the energy can't flow through there. It's healed by love and forgiveness. Now energy can flow to the heart, and from the heart it can start to flow even more upward to these upper energy centers, to the divine. So now you have a bridge to the divine again. So we need to, instead of moving down and out, stop focusing what's outside, stop living in the lower things, low vibrations, low energy centers. We need to be up and away, up and in. Move inward to the inner divinity, to the core of being, which is non-dual light. Allow Pluto to do its work. And if you do that, you will ascend. To ascend means really to move inward to the core of being. To ascend means to move towards the core of the universe. And this is how we stop the progression outward into darkness. This is how we stop the Big Bang, the outward expanse, and move back to the center of the universe. So we have to move back to the center of our universe, to the one. Excuse me. Thanks for listening today.